Hello everyone, you're on the Manhwa Vibes channel. Are you ready? Let's go. Devils, evil and cunning creatures with magical powers. These creatures have horns, wings, and other unusual features indicating their association with darkness and hell. They are indeed universally regarded as ugly creatures who lead people down a horrible path of immorality. But in fact, they are not at all like that. You'll see why I say that next, but in the meantime, click on the like under the video. Thank you. They have a complicated way of life, hiding among humans and feeding solely on human desires. Devils are constantly learning and improving, becoming more and more beautiful. And of course, they become more charismatic. They do this only to get what they want. Maybe it'll be someone you bump into on the street. And you wouldn't even know it. They're very good at disguising themselves. On the subway, people are going about their business while they're riding. Someone is listening to music. Someone is discussing something and laughing about it. And there are those who walk around the cars and want to get some information to people. Like this man who loudly shouts that devils exist and they have invaded our world. Turning his attention to the man in the tuxedo, the man with the placard shouts, "Satan, go away." A little earlier, our protagonist named Hein Shin had an accident in his car. He got a call offering to pick him up, but he said he didn't need to. He said he would take the subway. By the way, Hein Shin sometimes takes public transportation to work. This rarely happens because it's very risky. Moreover, his ability to become quite visible in crowded places. Hein Shin is willing to take this risk to remind himself who he really is. As you have already realized, luck was not on his side today. Other people didn't notice that there was something wrong with Hein Shin. On the contrary, they thought he was incredibly handsome and admired him. This man has drawn too much attention to Hein Shin. He's starting to get annoyed with all the noise. Hein Shin decides to pull out his phone and call Kim Yi-yoon, as the situation needs to be saved. The unfamiliar girl seemed to think that Hein Shin wasn't feeling well. She asked if he was okay. That's too dangerous. No one should know about who he really is. He replied briefly and politely that he was fine and told the girl to mind her own business and not pay attention to him. Hein Shin thought to himself that apparently today was the kind of day when everyone decided to act disgusted. This girl once again questioned if Hein Shin was definitely okay. Who is she? Maybe she's wondering for a reason. The man with the poster didn't like being interrupted and reached for the girl with his hand. At that moment, Hein Shin grabbed his arm. The man started screaming loudly because he was in pain. The girl was surprised by what was happening and just looked into Hein Shin's eyes. Hein Shin asked the girl to repeat what she said again. She only asked if he was doing well. But Hein Shin replied, "How?" And he looked into her eyes. He seemed to look into her eyes for too long. Hein Shin decided that it was necessary to leave immediately. The girl approached him. She asked him to stop. Hein Shin doesn't understand what this girl means. Oh yeah, he's still holding the man's hand with the placard. Hein Shin is holding his hand, arguing that the man wanted to hurt the girl. She responded that Hein Shin is now hurting the man with the placard and needs to stop. She was grateful for the help and urged her to let the man with the placard go. Hein Shin looked her in the eye. And she looked him in the eye. Well, he obeyed the girl and let go of the hand of the man with the placard. Hein Shin asked her how she could look him in the eye. At that moment, two policemen came in, walking purposefully toward Hein Shin. Oh, it turns out they came to the man with the poster. They say that this man has just been reported. He's surprised, as he says he hasn't done anything. However, the police officers have video evidence. The police officers are about to take the man to the police station. The girl said she would not resort to violence. But about his forgiveness was out of the question. By the way, earlier she wrote a complaint about the man and sent the police a video. The whole thing is quite bizarre. The man shows his supposedly injured hand and says he's a victim too. And then he points his finger at Hein Shin, who he says wanted to break his arm and called him a devil. Eyes like Hein Shin's come around regardless of age or gender. Anyone who comes into contact with him will irrevocably fall in love, no exceptions. If the man with the poster says one more word, Hein Shin will break his arm for real. The man yells to be forgiven and offers Hein Shin to have a cup of tea with him. By the way, he really has a look of love already. Oh, the door closes. Hein Shin needs to get out, since this is his station. We move to another location. Plastic surgery DV. Hein Shin is late. He was asked what happened and told that the consultation was delayed 10 minutes. Hein Shin asked if he could help find one. The doctor replied that he'd better ask Shin Moo-young about it. But knowing Shin Moo-young, he would start asking around about everything. So he shouldn't find out anything about it. Hein Shin doesn't know anything about this girl, not her name, her age, or her address. The doctor asked how they even met. Hein Shin replied that they met on the subway this morning. The doctor asked if she might have a notable appearance. Hein Shin replied, definitely not. It seemed strange to the doctor why he was looking for her then if he couldn't even remember anything. The point is that Hein Shin needs to be convinced of something. It doesn't matter if he remembers what she looks like. What matters is that once they run into each other again. Oh my god. There she is. Hein Shin recognized her immediately. Wow, that's quite an encounter. Among human desires, those that lead to immorality are called the 7 deadly sins. Devils are born out of just those. They have wandered among men for centuries to satisfy their hunger. On the battlefields, on social parties, in the black markets. The time, however, has come. The civilization that seemed to exist forever fell one day. Now the devils had to find a new way. For their own survival. And naturally for an incredibly long life. They had to adapt to the human world by learning trades. I left the office and closed the door behind me. The nurses were just waiting for Dr. Yi-yoon. They asked if Yi-yoon was going to the break room. Yes, that's where he was going since he was on his break. The nurses were crazy about the way Dr. Yi-yoon smelled. He asked them if they were having lunch today. They replied that they wanted to check out the new burger place across from the hospital. He thought it was terrific and wished them a good appetite. Oh, someone seems to have charmed the receptionist girls. Although, what's to be surprised about, they have such a superpower. In the staff room, the devils chose a place to satisfy their desires. Yi-yoon said loudly as he entered the room, so that everyone could hear that it was not a stranger. This is the plastic surgery hospital and the surgeons themselves. Apparently Yi-yoon is agitated. He has already warned me many times to eat carefully during lunch. Because at any moment Hein Shin might walk in. Meet Shin Moo-young. A race is mammon, desire is greed. They wondered where Hein Shin is. He's still in counseling. By the way, this is Ub Tang. A race is Leviathan, desire is envy. He said he heard that Hein Shin came by subway today. Hein Shin is up to his old tricks again. This is very dangerous. Last time a crowd gathered around him and they had to pick him up. By the way, they looked pretty damn cool back then. Dr. Kim Yi-yoon actually. The race is Beelzebub, the desire is gluttony. Moo-young regrets that Hein Shin is turned off by the sight of blood because it's incredibly delicious. Perhaps things will get better. It's been 2 years since then. This is Lee Young-won. His race is Satan, his desire for anger. He asks if there's any medicine that can help Hein Shin. Moo-young calls Young-won a dumbass and asks, could something like that exist? Young-won got angry because he was called a dumbass. Moo-young never liked Satan's race because they were always freaking out. Young-won shouted loudly, die. A girl sits in the surgeon's office. She wants to get her breasts enlarged. Park Hein Shin. The race is Lucifer. The desire is pride. He is the chief plastic surgeon. Hein Shin asks the girl her name. Her name is Ju Lai Na. She remembered that she met him in the subway this morning. Turns out he's a doctor. Hein Shin asked what size she wanted. After thinking for a while, she determined that she wanted a size 4. Hein Shin smiled when he heard about a size 4. He warned the girl that not everything big looks good and she needs to consider her physique as well. Ju Lai Na asked, Dr. Hein Shin isn't telling her this because he's unsure of his abilities, is he? There was a brief eye contact. Hein Shin reminded her of what the girl said earlier. She doesn't understand what the doctor is talking about. Hein Shin is puzzled by how she does it. If she were an ordinary person, her heart would be broken by now. She would have literally pounced on him. Why is this girl indifferent after looking into his eyes? She's not even the devil. Who is she really? Hein Shin said. Why did the girl then ask him that? What exactly was it about? The girl answered. In the subway, she asked him if he was really okay. She decided to tell a brief story from her life. She used to have a hard time asking someone for help. She was just a little girl back then. She had an acquaintance who always helped. That's why she thought Dr. Hein Shin had a similar situation. Hein Shin listened thoughtfully to the girl's story. He also asked why she decided to have this surgery. Ju Lai Na was a bit confused, not knowing how to answer that question correctly. She ended up saying that it was personal information. Ju Lai Na said that she definitively decided that she needed this surgery and she would do it anyway. She asked Dr. Hein Shin if he would help her. Hein Shin looked her in the eye and said, I'm afraid I can't. She was shocked by Dr. Hein Shin's answer. Ju Lai Na doesn't understand why the doctor turned her down. She thinks it was because of what she told him. The girl states that this is very petty. Dr. Hein Shin asked to see the calendar. The thing is, he has all his days scheduled. She noticed that every week Monday is free. Mondays are his days off. And beyond what is scheduled, he doesn't operate. Ju Lai Na asked when he could operate on her. Hein Shin said he didn't know. The closest time is next year. She was horrified by what she had just heard. What do you mean next year? Hein Shin replied that if she didn't like that option, she could go to another hospital. They would find a time that was convenient for her there. He also said that she probably knew that before she came here, right? Hein Shin is the best at what he does and that's why he has so many patients. Hein Shin declares that it's time for him to leave. The girl won't let him go. After a while, the girl visits the cafe. She is incredibly upset. Ju Lai Na literally exploded with rage over Dr. Hein Shin putting his schedule first. She remembered that the closest thing to next year is next year. She needs this surgery right away, before Appa comes back. By the way, Appa is the older brother, a close friend or man who is the object of the girl's adoration. Apparently the girl is up to something. She says she's going to make Dr. Hein Shin get on his knees in front of her and beg her to agree to the surgery at his clinic. At this point, Hein Shin performs the surgery. He watches the blood flow. The nurse doesn't understand why Dr. Hein Shin has stopped. She asks, is everything okay? He replied, yes, we're going on. The surgery was over and Hein Shin left the room. He went to Dr. Yi Yoon. Yi Yoon was working at his laptop computer at this point. Hein Shin called out to Yi Yoon. Yi Yoon was surprised to see Hein Shin visiting his office. Did something happen? Hein Shin tells him that he was having an operation right now. And for a very short time he felt completely normal when he saw the blood. What? Yi Yoon was surprised. How on earth? Hein Shin doesn't know why yet. After that, he became disgusted again. So much so that even his hands began to shake as if it was the first time. Even though it was for a very short time. But at the sight of the blood, he suddenly had an appetite. They should definitely find out the cause of what happened. Yi Yoon wondered. He asked if something unusual was going on at Hein Shin's place today. Hein Shin doesn't understand what the question is about. It's important to know because the effect appeared and immediately disappeared. Yi Yoon ponders, isn't it because there was some reason, but now it has disappeared? He thinks it is similar to the situation when people stop taking medicine and they inevitably get sick again. Yi Yoon asked me to notify him if Hein Shin remembered anything. And he remembered something, namely what happened on the subway this morning. He met the girl this morning and nothing happened to her when she looked him in the eye. Yi-yoon was shocked to hear this. Yi-yoon wasn't happy that Hein-shin was only telling him about it now. He should have shared this information with him right away. Yi-yoon guesses that this is the girl Hein-shin was looking for. Yes, that's the girl. Apparently she is the right person to solve his problem. Ju-Lai-na is thinking about which clinic to go to. Apparently she has no idea. Wow, she gets a call from Dr. Hein-shin. She's really surprised. She doesn't understand what he wants from her. Hein-shin looked at her. He noticed that she was wearing the same clothes. She reasoned that Dr. Hein-shin had called her abruptly on her way home. That's why she had to go back. From his pocket he took something out. It was a woman's pendant. Ju-Lai-na said that he wanted to talk to her about something. What was it about? Yes, he has something to say. Strange smell, thought Hein-shin. He asked her, does she urgently need surgery? He could see that Ju-Lai-na was very angry. She replied, of course. Do you think I want to do it because I have nothing better to do? She thinks she's being mocked. She thinks Dr. Hein-shin doesn't seem to be listening to her. He's holding that very pendant in front of her. Wow, that color, Ju-Lai-na said. The color of blood. Hein-shin is holding the pendant right in front of her face. Ju-Lai-na apologized for getting too close. She asked him what kind of pendant it was. Hein-shin figured it out. The reason is exactly in her eyes. He really doesn't know why. But he needs to figure it out right now. Ju-Lai-na is perplexed that she was called in just to show him the pendant. No, it's not because of that at all. Hein-shin is going to kiss the girl right now. She replied, what? And demanded to stay away from her. Ju-Lai-na thinks that's outrageous. She warned that she has a black belt. Hein-shin asked why she was doing that. If she can look him in the eye and reject him after that, he will do the surgery. Right now he just needs to see if his ability works or not. He asked her if she would agree to such terms or not. She looked him in the eye. Ju-Lai-na doesn't understand. Is he seriously going to kiss her? At this point she went into rationality mode. After pushing Hein-shin away, she declared that she already likes someone. Unbelievable. This is the first time he's been rejected. Oh, Ju-Lai-na thinks she was caught off guard. She almost kissed him. Dr. Hein-shin wants to tell her that she'll start working here tomorrow. At this hospital. But why? She doesn't understand why he is addressing her unofficially. Hein-shin replied that he addresses all of his employees that way. But she stated that she wasn't going to work here. It turns out then that she doesn't want Hein-shin to do her surgery. She doesn't understand. What does surgery have to do with working at this clinic? It's as simple as that. If she gets a job here as a staff member, Dr. Hein-shin will be able to do the surgery as soon as his schedule is free. The problem is that she already has a good job. Hein-shin said the monthly salary is $4,000, and plus 4 major insurances and compensation. He added that outside of work hours she can do anything except when he will call her on duty. Aren't those the best of terms? It seemed strange to the girl that Dr. Hein-shin had suddenly changed his attitude toward her so drastically. She suspects that he must have fallen in love with her. Of course, it's not for nothing. You just have to do what Hein-shin says. It's easy, isn't it? Ju-Lai-na asks, what exactly will be necessary to do? She wonders what Dr. Hein-shin wants to make her do. It gets on her nerves so much. On behalf of the author, I want to say that you have to be brave. It's not the first time for you. Hein-shin asked if he could continue. Yes, of course. As if she could object. He told that for some reason he can't stand the sight of blood. Ju-Lai-na wondered why he was operating then. Dr. Hein-shin replied that he voluntarily tolerates it. But how is that possible? Frankly speaking, he was already very tired. That's why he had to get into the business of planning operations. But there is one thing. Looking at the girl, he said, I feel better when I see you. What? Really? The girl was very surprised. What is he talking about anyway? She abruptly got up from her chair and asked if Dr. Hein Shin really had a crush on her. Ju Lai Na advised her to better admit it right away. Hein Shin thought about the fact that, as expected, he would have to forcibly convince her to make a decision. But she decided to say that she agreed. Hein Shin was very surprised. The girl asked if she could go out to work tomorrow already. By the way, she wants a day off for her second job. This is strange since she previously said that she didn't trust Dr. Hein Shin. Ju Lai Na stated that it doesn't matter at all anymore. She feels like Dr. Hein Shin really needs help. Seriously? Help? Him? Ju Lai Na smilingly held out her hand and said that she was very happy to work with Dr. Hein Shin right up to her surgery. Hein Shin just walked past her. He turned around and told her that she needed to be at work by 9 a.m. He also told her not to be late. Then he walked out of his office and slammed the door, leaving the girl alone. She finds this strange, as it was still a good thing. What happened to him again? The next day she went to the plastic surgery clinic. The receptionist asked if she had an appointment. No, of course, the girl replied. As of today, she's working as an assistant for Dr. Hein Shin. Why that look on her face? Ju Lai Na was asked to follow her. She was brought into Dr. Hein Shin's office. He was busy working, but he told Ju Lai Na to come in. Hein Shin asked why she was standing on the doorstep. He asked her to close the door and come closer. Hein Shin showed her to her room. In this room, he put everything he needed. The bathroom is outside to the left. Wow, the girl was crazy about everything. By the way, she had seen something like this before. She noticed that the interior is very dark. Dr. Hein Shin seems to like that. Hein Shin said her name. And he touched her face with his hand. Ju Lai Na asked if he was going to do the surgery. Hein Shin didn't answer the question, but decided to warn Ju Lai Na that if other guys came in here when he wasn't there, that she shouldn't pay attention to them. She replied, okay. Ju Lai Na thought about what other guys was he talking about. Hein Shin let go of her face and told her to get some rest. Hein Shin walked out of the office and slammed the door behind him. Ju Lai Na was glad that he had finally left. She shouted loudly, freedom. Ju Lai Na decided to look around the room first. She looks in different directions hoping to find something interesting. Hein Shin's desk is in complete order. In the end, nothing interesting. She goes to poke around somewhere else. Ju Lai Na accidentally hit something. It was a photo frame. Oh, who is that woman? Ju Lai Na wondered who she was to Hein Shin. She's so pretty. Could she be his girlfriend? Ju Lai Na began to ponder. What if everything was originally planned? Ex-girlfriend, bereavement. Perhaps she'd better put the picture frame back. Oh, who's that in the back? Shin Mu-young whispered quietly in her ear. Yes, she better put the picture frame back. Oh, she almost got caught. Shin Mu-young asked her, so is that you? The same medicine. Ju Lai Na didn't understand. What kind of medicine are we talking about? Shin Mu-young introduced himself and said that he was a doctor at this hospital. She replied that her name was Ju Lai Na. Shin Mu-young offered to shake hands. She agreed. Oh, there's some magic going on. No, don't look him in the eye. It's too late, and you were warned by Hein Shin. This devil is very dangerous. By the way, let me tell you something. Depending on the race, each devil has his own taste and emotions, as well as the special method of seduction he was born with. Since Shin Mu-young belongs to the Mammon race, his method is his hands. If someone touches his hand, there's no way. He becomes his prisoner. People meant nothing to him. They were chess pieces that could be replaced at any time. Shin Mu-young walked up to Dr. Hein Shin's office and was surprised by what he saw. The devils were eavesdropping near the door. Shin Mu-young asked them who they were guarding. They told him that the patient who came in this morning was still here. But Shin Mu-young replied that it's not news at all that girls come to Park Hein Shin just to see him. Bai Tang clarified that Han Shin invited this patient himself. Shin Mu-young doesn't understand, so why did Han Shin do it? Young-won asked to keep his voice down since he can't hear anything. Shin Mu-young wanted to see who was there, but Young-won didn't want to give way. Shin Mu-young saw a woman, but he couldn't see her face. Shin Mu-young started to get worried. He saw Han Shin standing next to the girl. The devils all got goosebumps. They think they need to get out of here. The devils started to walk away, but Han Shin Mu-young lingered. Bai Tang asked him if he was going with them or not. The emotion he feeds on is greed. Han Shin's caution, on the other hand, prompted him. Current time. Hey. Shin Mu-young interrogates her and asks her why Park Han Shin brought her here. Is Ju Lai not thinking about whether to tell him? She remembered what Han Shin told her earlier. Namely, that if other guys came here while he was out of the office, she should ignore them. Ju Lai Na replied that she couldn't tell. Shin Mu-young doesn't understand why. It's a secret. She needs to work and she asked to let go of her hand, please. Shin Mu-young apologized and stepped away from her for a bit. He's shocked at what she asked. Seriously? Let go of his hand. Ju Lai Na said that since it wasn't even her place, it would be better if she went back to her place. Shin Mu-young took her hand again. Asked her, does she really feel nothing holding his hand? This is outrageous. Isn't her heart beating faster? Perhaps she sees him differently. Ju Lai Na looked into his eyes. And she said, no. Should she? Shin Mu-young was incredibly shocked. All he could think about was who Park Han Shin brought here. Who is she? That's how it started. Operation Fall in Love with Ju Lai Na. The first challenger is Yu Bai Tang. The method of seduction, the voice. Oh. Ju Lai Na was surprised. Oh. The devils are perplexed by the fact that Yu Bai Tang only uttered oh. Is he even trying there? This is a complete failure. Second challenger Lee Young-won. The method of seduction, a pretty face. Ju Li Na thought he was pretty cute. The guys think it must have worked. She told Lee Young-won that it felt like he was in elementary school. Lee Young-won was furious at what he heard. Shin Mu-young became very amused. But in the end, also a failure. The third contender is Kim Yi-yoon. Method of seduction, pheromones. Ju Li Na warned that she can't stand the strong smell of cologne. A fail again. Han Shin heard Shin Mu-young in his office wanting to try again. He walked into his office and asked, what exactly do you want to try? Oops, awkward situation. Devils started making excuses, saying it wasn't what he thought it was. Han Shin asked them. Did they have a great time in his office while he wasn't here? Han Shin escorted them out of his office and told them in a serious tone to get lost. Kim Yi-yoon walks up to Han Shin. He thinks Han Shin ran over here because he noticed that he was sweating. Kim Yi-yoon warned Han Shin to be on guard. Otherwise, one of the guys would kidnap her at any moment. The devils left the office and slammed the door behind them. Dr. Han Shin decided to remind Ju Lai Na what he had told her earlier. He made it clear, ignore the guys if they showed up here. Ju Lai Na told him that she had done just that. They were the ones who started harassing her. Han Shin noticed that she had already managed to rummage around on his desk. You think you chatted with them and now you're friends? Han Shin decided to tell it like it really is. After Ju Lai Na has the surgery, she'll never see him or them again anyway. So there's nothing to catch here. Ju Lai Na was indignant since she said they broke in here on their own. She wasn't going to talk to them at all. Han Shin asked her to do as she was told and nothing else. She agreed and said that from now on she would do nothing but what Han Shin told her. If he doesn't have a job for Ju Lai Na, she asked not to call her then. Abruptly she turned around and walked out of Dr. Han Shin's office. Oh, that Ju Lai Na girl. The next day at the plastic surgery clinic. Is she going to work with headphones on? Han Shin walked over and took the headphones out of her ears. Ju Lai Na is furious at his action. He asked her to start working. She took her headphones away from him, but you can see that she is very angry. She's so cute when she's angry. What do you think? Write your opinion in the comments. Han Shin asked her if she was serious about acting this way. A few hours of work went by. Ju Lai Na asked Dr. Han Shin if he was done. Han Shin replied, no. Ju Lai Na says it wasn't that long yesterday. The thing is, he needs to look her in the eye more today. She doesn't like the fact that he's doing things his way. Look how she's talking. Ju Lai Na asked him to stop this show. She's starting to get annoyed with it. At that moment, she slipped on the candy that the devil Lee Young-won lost. Oh no. She's falling. Han Shin, help her. Looks like he's not going to catch her. She thinks Han Shin is heartless. She'll probably get a concussion, maybe even die. Although no, she can't die before her grandmother does. Oh, Ju Lai Na almost fell down. What? Where did this chair come from? She doesn't understand what just happened. A chair? It's not like it was here before. Who put it there? Ju Lai Na touched Han Shin with her hand to say something. She can't feel her legs. Ju Lai Na begs for help to get up. He looked at her and didn't say a word. Han Shin reached out to help her. She got up from her chair. Ju Lai Na thanked him for his help. Han Shin asked her to be more careful in the future. Even though he said so. Oh, she found what she was looking for. She was looking for the dining room. Ju Lai Na can't get that fall out of her head. It's scary to imagine what could have happened. But it's really strange. Ju Lai Na thinks that no matter how you look at what happened, the chair definitely wasn't there in the first place. Maybe she was so distracted that she didn't even notice if the chair was there or not. Ju Lai Na is pissed off by the doctor's attitude. She's hurt that she was falling right in front of him, but Dr. Han Shin stood there as if he didn't care at all. She is convinced for the second time that he is completely heartless. Someone handed her a cup of coffee. Ju Lai Na thought to herself that it was that guy. It turned out to be Yu Bai Tang. She thanked him. Ju Lai Na remembered that it was the guy who had stopped by yesterday. By the way, he's the most taciturn of them all. But she doesn't know his name. He said his name was Yu Bai Tang. He heard from Yi Yoon that Ju Lai Na is helping Han Shin. She remembers who Yi Yoon is. Is she even allowed to talk to him? Anyway, she wasn't the first to start. Yu Bai Tang asked her to take care of Han Shin. Yes, of course. Ju Lai Na thinks that Yu Bai Tang actually has a beautiful voice. He said that Han Shin is very important to him. She realized already that Yu Bai Tang and Dr. Park Han Shin must be very close. He told her that they've been friends for quite a long time. Ju Lai Na thinks they're the same age as him then. The same age. Yu Bai Tang isn't sure about that. She thought it was quite strange. They're longtime friends, but they don't know each other's age. Well, she thinks that's also possible these days. Yu Bai Tang is a little intimidating, but surprisingly, he talks to her in a very friendly way. Perhaps he's a good man. Had she known he wasn't human at all. She wished she could enjoy her coffee, and it's time for her to leave. Yu Bai Tang said her name, Ju Lai Na. She turned in his direction. With his sweet devilish voice, he can seduce people even in their dreams. Yu Bai Tang belongs to the Leviathan race. The girl administrators are annoyed that all the attention goes to Ju Lai Na. First it was Dr. Park and now Dr. Yu. One of these girls saw that Ju Lai Na was with Dr. Shin Moo Young. They think that Ju Lai Na apparently wanted to make all the doctors fall in love with her. Ju Lai Na asked if they wanted something. Yu Bai Tang replied that now that she's here, it's much more fun to work. Since the emotion he feeds on is envy. He hopes she stays for a long time. Ju Lai Na understands that Yu Bai Tang wants her to work here longer, but it's still only until her surgery. She agrees with Dr. Park Han Shin that it's best not to get close to other doctors. Ju Lai Na walked into the office. Han Shin asked her where the hell has she been. She was surprised that Dr. Park had already done everything so quickly. It hadn't even been 2 hours yet since Hein Shin had told her to stay put. She said she just went to get coffee. But what we do know is that she also chatted with Dr. Yu. Ju Lai Na stated that this is not a prison. His surgery time was shortened. Or rather, in the first and second, he no longer felt disgust when he saw blood. But today he felt nothing at all at the sight of blood. He looked at it as if it were pouring red water. Was it because of her, too? Unknown. But it will be much harder to find out if something else unpredictable comes up. Hein Shin must surely understand why such an effect is created. He called out to Ju Lai Na, asked if she had plans after work today. She replied that she was having dinner with a friend. Hein Shin asked to cancel dinner. But why? The thing is that she has to go somewhere with Dr. Park. Namely, to his house. What? Dr. Hein Shin's house? She's shocked by this. Ju Lai Na thinks he has lost his mind. She doesn't understand why she has to go to his house. Hein Shin wants to experiment on something. Oh my gosh. Experiment. Ju Lai Na has the most horrible thoughts about it in her head. What kind of experimentation? Why can't it be done in the clinic? He replied that he couldn't do it here. Ju Lai Na asked why. Hein Shin got angry. He just can't. So he suggests she go with him. She doesn't agree. Ju Lai Na reminded him that only during working hours is she supposed to do whatever he says. And regardless of her position, he has no right to try to bring her to his house. This is just crazy. She turned her back on him. Dr. Hein Shin is begging for help. Help what? Is he asking for help now? Hein Shin looks at her silently. She looks at him, too. She hesitates whether to agree or not. Ju Lai Na turns her head in his direction and declares that he will have to operate on her in the most perfect way. He is still waiting for her consent. Ju Lai Na decided to help Dr. Park Hein Shin after all and agreed to go to his house. After a while, they go to the doctor's house by car. Wow, that's a nice car Hein Shin has. Ju Lai Na texts a friend to a friend she was supposed to meet and have dinner with tonight. She wrote that she's sorry, but her grandmother suddenly got sick. Probably won't be able to get together tonight. Next time, she treats and apologized. Ju Lai Na looked at Hein Shin and thought about how it was all because of him. She asked, "Have you arrived yet?" "Almost," Hein Shin replied. Ju Lai Na is surprised that he decided to take the car at rush hour. She says it would have been faster by bus. Hein Shin replies that he doesn't take public transportation. Ju Lai Na guesses that maybe he doesn't like being around people. She recalled that it was in the subway that they met. The thing is that Hein Shin had an accident at the time and the car had to be sent for repairs. Ju Lai Na was surprised that the accident was so serious that the car had to be repaired. She asked if he was hurt. He was only slightly hurt. And so they drove to his house. Wow, what is that? An incredibly tall building. Hein Shin asked Ju Lai Na to hurry up. They got into the elevator. Ju Lai Na suspected something was wrong even when he suddenly said he would pay her for her work. She asked if she could ask him how old he was. Dr. Park replied that he didn't seem old yet. Ju Lai Na thought he was probably a little over 20 years old. He replied, "About that." At that moment, the elevator doors opened. What should Ju Lai Na expect? Hein Shin opened the front door to her apartment. He told her she could put on her slippers, though he only had men's slippers. It doesn't matter to her. Dr. Pak asked her to come in. Wow, the living room is impressive in scale. Hein Shin is quite wealthy. There are collectible paintings from famous artists hanging on the walls. But one of the paintings stood out from the others. What could that mean? Well, what is the essence of the painting? Ju Lai Na looked at it for a long time, trying to examine every detail. Hein Shin told her that it was the devil that Dante described in the Divine Comedy. It seemed strange to Ju Lai Na that he was talking about the devil. What was his point? At that moment, a cool wind blew in from the window. Hein Shin is talking about Lucifer. He is also called the King of Devils. He was originally an angel whom God trusted the most. But one day evil crept into his heart. Lucifer saw himself as superior to God and sought his throne. For this, the god became angry with him and banished him from heaven. That is how he ended up in hell. It's a pretty fascinating legend. July Na doesn't even know how to react to this. She can see that she is a little worried. July Na asked for a drink of water. Hein Shin said the water is in the kitchen. She poured water into a cup. She pondered the fact that there didn't seem to be any suspicious objects around. She remembered what Dr. Pak had said the day they first met. He said that when he looked into her eyes, he could bear the sight of blood. She also remembered the creepy picture in the living room. She thought it was all very strange. Does he really worship the devil? July Na decided that she would wait for the right moment and leave under some excuse. She told the doctor that she was back. Hein Shin was standing by the sink. But something seemed to be wrong. What is Dr. Park Hein Shin doing? He asked July Na to come up to him in the bathroom. July Na is shocked by this as she doesn't know what to expect. Could it possibly be dangerous for her life? Scary, interesting. She walks to the door. July Na told him as she went into the bathroom. She went in and saw a sink with a red substance. And standing next to the sink was Hein Shin. July Na asked what it was. She didn't understand why he wanted to take off his clothes. Hein Shin replied that his clothes got dirty. July Na spun around in different directions for a good look around the bathroom. Hein Shin threatened her that if she didn't come right away, he would drag her in here himself. He said, "Okay, stay there and take my hand." Just like that? Yes, just like that. Hein Shin said he didn't feel anything. No bloodlust, no fear. It's exactly as he thought it would be. The change happens when he makes contact with this girl. Their eyes meet and his fear disappears. And when he touches her, he even loses his appetite. In this case, he pulls her arm toward him. What happens if they go beyond these actions? July Na doesn't understand what he is doing. Then she pushed him away from her. Why did he suddenly go for a hug? Hein Shin said that's enough for today. This all seems quite strange to July Na. He says that their experiment is over for today. Over? What was it all about? Hein Shin ignored this question. July Na is annoyed. She turned around and walked away. Hein Shin asked, where was she going? She replied that since they're done with the experiment, then she'll go home. Hein Shin wants to give her a ride home in her car. She replied that it's okay and that it's okay to take the subway, adding that they'll see each other tomorrow at work. July Na wonders why he's suddenly so nice to her. This is only the first stage of the experiment. The next day at the plastic surgery clinic, she was greeted by Shin Moo-young. July Na was just working at her computer. She asked why he wasn't at his desk. He replied that he was already done with all his business. July Na poked her head out and looked to see what Dr. Park was doing now. He was just busy with documentation. By the way, since yesterday, Dr. Hein Shin has been trying not to bother her. Dr. Shin Moo-young asked Dr. Park if he was going to take a break. He also told Hein Shin to wait for him as he had something to tell him. July Na grabbed Dr. Shin Moo-young by the arm. He wasn't expecting this, but he's quite curious. She wants to ask him about Dr. Park. Shin Moo-young takes both of her hands and asks her what she wants to ask him. July Na says that Dr. Hein Shin told her that all the head doctors at this clinic have known each other for a very long time. He replied, yes, they have. She wonders if by any chance Dr. Park is sick. Julie Na said that yesterday at Dr. Park Hein Shin's house, they were talking about some kind of devil. She thinks he seriously believes in such things. Dr. Shin Moo-young is having an awful lot of fun. He replied that Hein Shin really is a bit superstitious. July Na also recalled that she almost fell on the floor when she was in the office with him. However, she wasn't hurt because she fell on a chair that came literally out of nowhere. July Na thinks this is quite strange. Shin Moo-young is horrified that Hyun Shin decided to use his powers in front of her, since that's not something that should be done. He replied to Ju Lai-na that maybe she didn't notice the chair from the beginning. Ju Lai-na is sure that there was no chair there. Moreover, when she first met Dr. Park, he had an accident at the time and crashed his car. For someone who had just been in an accident, he looked overly calm. Shin Moo-young suggested she calm down. She thinks it's all too suspicious. Ju Lai-na asked Dr. Shin Moo-young what he thought about it. He doesn't even know what to say to her about it all. Dr. Shin Moo-young decides to pretend like he was called out and needs to leave. Ju Lai-na says no one called him, but he ended up running away from her quickly after all. Looks like the Sherlock Holmes woke up in her. Ju Lai-na walks into the women's bathroom. Really, what's going on? Every time she asks a question, for some reason everyone changes the subject. She doesn't seem to stop there and find out everything. Ju Lai-na says that she won't get away with it next time. The girl administrators are talking about Ju Lai-na. They say that she makes them unbearably angry. Since she is easy and simple to get into the clinic, they think it's because of her looks. Ju Lai-na hears them gossiping about her. Everywhere you look there are people like that. This girl is like an eyesore to them. It's always about the doctors. They remember her name. I think her name is Ju Lai-na. These ladies say Dr. Shin went to her office again today. Ju Lai-na heard all kinds of gossip about her when she was in high school. The boys discussed her and said she was very pretty. They said she had no mother or father. They didn't even teach her much at home. One of her classmates decided to hit on her, but another classmate replied that she was too good for him. People around her were always gossiping about others, trying to humiliate them. But they never expected it. Throwing down the book, Ju Lai-na asked, "What are you yakking about?" Ju Lai-na came out of the bathroom stall, where she was spotted by the receptionist girls. She was not one to just sit and cry. She thought they were having such an entertaining conversation and wanted to join them. Oh, what's going to happen now? Lee Young-won is glad that the fun part has finally begun. Smiling, he yells, "Fight, fight." By the way, let me remind you, Young-won is Satan and Bai-tan is of the Leviathan race. These devils have always been together. Because despite their different species, the emotions they fed on were envy and anger. Envy breeds anger. So Leviathan and Satan have always stuck together. And this time too. After Ju Lai-na's unexpected appearance, there was more envy and anger in the clinic than usual. And Bai Tang and Young-won were the ones most looking forward to the explosion of these emotions. The girl began to make excuses. Like, they didn't say anything bad about Ju Lai-na. One of the girls said that Ju Lai-na wasn't officially hired here. She also said that everyone already knew that she only got the job because of Dr. Park. She was also told that she was always stuck in the clinic because she liked Dr. Hyun Shin. Ju Lai-na thinks about the fact that he is actually the one who hired her. Why would they think she's here because of Hyun Shin? Who else here likes who? That receptionist girl made me laugh. Anyway, Ju Lai-na is going to ignore them because they pissed her off. Ju Lai-na hovered over her and asked, "Are you done yakking?" The receptionist girl asked what Ju Lai-na wanted from her. Ju Lai-na asked a counter question, wondering if I like Dr. Park, right? Ju Lai-na took her phone out of her pocket and showed them someone. The receptionist girls asked her who he was. He is quite handsome. He's also tall. He's a supermodel. He's won fame all over the world. A Kang Yu-han. And he's exactly the type of man she likes. Oh, it was a surprise to them. They think he's really handsome. Ju Lai-na said that the receptionist's girl had good taste. If they want to see more of him, let them tell her. The girls have no words. What was that just now? Ju Lai-na gave them a card with his limited edition picture on it. They think she actually likes him. Maybe they thought wrong about her somehow. The girls' administrators remember what the supermodel's name was. One of the girls suspected that Ju Li-na is very strange. Lee Young-won sensed something. namely that their anger evaporated. And their jealousy evaporated too. Ju Lai Na came out of the bathroom. She ran into Dr. Park Hyung Shin by chance. He was unhappy about something. Hyung Shin asked her why she let them go so easily. He thinks that if she had done something, she wouldn't have lost anyway. After all, he was the one who hired her, not she who seduced him. Ju Lai Na replied that she could have fought them to repay them. But rumors began to circulate here that she only got the job because of Dr. Hyun Shin. She thinks that if she acts recklessly, the gossip at the clinic might affect him too. She's worried about Hyun Shin again. Who should be worried about who around here anyway? Dr. Park told her she could go. She walked into the office. In the office, Kim Yi-yoon and Shin Moo-young were chatting. Shin Moo-young asked Ju Lai Na if she really liked Kang Yoo-han. Yeah, the walls in the clinic seemed to be too thin. Shin Moo-young advised her that the next time the girls start harassing her again, just beat them up. The devils thought it would be all over with the little incident. But as it turned out, that was just the beginning. Shin Moo-young was hungry. Ju Lai Na suggested that he go out and eat. He replied that he couldn't. Because of her. Just like Moo-young said, after that incident, all rumors about her disappeared. The girl administrators came to the conclusion that there was nothing between Ju Lai Na and Dr. Shin. They think it's still not nice to talk about someone behind their back. And yet they still think that Ju Lai Na is good. The other girls' administrators apologized for that. Not only the gossip, but also the envy and anger that used to flourish in the clinic instantly disappeared. The next day, Ju Lai Na came to work. She went to her office. The receptionist girl called her in. Smiling, she wished her a good morning. This was unexpected for Ju Lai Na because until recently they had been discussing her heatedly. She responded by wishing her a good morning too. The negative emotions towards Ju Lai Na had subsided among the clinic staff, so the devils began to starve. Strange, can greed disappear so easily? You can see that Shin Moo-young is in a very bad way. Ju Lai Na tells him not to give up. She thought about the fact that Dr. Shin's salary was cut to pay her and he feels bad because of it. If only she knew what he was really feeling bad about. Shin Moo-young talks about how cute she is. A So would eat her up right now. He looked greedily into her eyes. At that moment, Hyun Shin suddenly walked in. Shin Moo-young said that he was coming back. Then he left the office. Yongwon is screaming that he's hungry. It's a tough time for the devils. Shin Moo-young lies there without strength. When he drinks, he can't taste it at all. This seems to be the end. They must do something urgently. But what can they do? After all, this has been going on since that day. Yongwon chews his lollipop and declares that nothing is impossible for them. It's time to take action.